Why do children love some picture books and not others? I was thinking about this today when I was going through my own collection, and it's so important that as picture books creators, we know what appeals to our audience. You probably know why you like picture books, and you probably remember what it was to be a child enjoying those picture books. But why do I like picture books? Why does your neighbour like picture books? There's so many different reasons. And by understanding other people's perspectives, we can start to understand our audience. So today, I'm going to show you 10 of my favourite picture books that I loved as a child and why I love them so much. And compare that to your favourite picture books and what you enjoyed. And see whether there's any similarities or differences. Because once we kind of understand what it is that's expected from us, we can start making a picture books that appeal to a greater audience. I'm Jessica Colliver. I'm a neuroscientist and picture book scholar. I will be leaving the details of each of these books, the authors, illustrators, in the box below, so do check them out if you're interested in purchasing them. They are just fantastic books. Really recommend them. So let's get started. Number 1 is Get Up and Go, Little Dinosaur. Now, technically, this is a board book, and it's a good thing too, because this is very old, very battered, very loved little picture book. And the reason that I love this so much is probably because it was the first picture book I owned, but also because it has some wonderful action words on each page. It's a very simple story. And when my parents would read this to me, when you use action words in a book, it kind of encourages you to act them out. And this is what would happen, is we would wiggle and we would pretend to climb and we'd pretend to slide. And that kind of engagement that you would get with a picture book by acting out these different words is just perfect for increasing bonding and engagement with the person that you're reading with and the picture book itself. And it was a fantastic way to get me into the excitement of what picture books can bring, that it's kind of a game when you're really little. And the best thing about it is at the end, when you've had all the action words and you've been busy and you do lots of jumping about and wriggling, is that it ends on a nice quiet hug page, which again, we're talking lots of bonding with that parent that reads to you. And also, you're bringing down the energy from that high intensity running around, excitement, wiggling and sliding, to a more calmer bedtime, go to sleep, which is exactly what you want for a really young child, and also for parents when they do read these books at bedtime, because picture books are in a unique location that, yes, they can be read during the day, and they most likely will be by lots of different people, but they are also used to capture their audiences right before they go to sleep. So what we can take away from this picture book is that using action words in our writing can encourage children and parents to get involved and connect further with your picture book on a deeper level. And also, if you're going to use lots of action words, you might want to calm it down at the end of your story so that when it comes to bedtime and you're reading it, everybody goes to bed a little bit calmer. Because if you don't have that last page where everything's a little bit calmer, then parents may not read it at bedtime. They may choose something that is calmer instead, which means that your picture book isn't being read regularly. And we want that regularity. We want them to keep coming back, because when you keep coming back to an experience and you're enjoying that experience and you're loving it more and more, it really is embraced by the audience, and it's more likely to be remembered and recommended if you've enjoyed your time shared with the book. Number 2, The Black and White Cat. Now, I love the illustrations of these. It's just so realistic looking and they're just beautiful. And I have to say is, without a doubt, this has formed the basis of my love for Little Cottages. It's so beautiful, these illustrations that they have. Now, this is a book that I used to spend ages looking at the illustrations, because there is definitely a story beneath the story. We have a picture book about a cat that lives in the city and ends up going to the countryside and moving into a house there. That is what the text is all about. However, the illustrations hint that there's a little bit more. You see, in the city scenes, we've got an empty house. And it kind of hints that maybe this cat was abandoned. Whereas in the later scenes, we have a house that's full of life and beautiful things going on. It's like a massive metaphor for this story. And even though I didn't fully understand, I did pick up on that subtext. And as I've grown older, I've come to understand more about what was going on. And that's one of the reasons why I loved it so much, was because I picked up on that. I knew that there was something else more to this book. The metaphor was there, but I didn't fully understand it. So I would spend ages trying to work out what it was trying to tell me, what more there was to it. And that increased engagement is why I loved this book. And the other reason is because this is a really fantastic example of having the whole book work for it, because it starts off with this illustration, not part of the story, but as you can see, we've got a very dark pause on it. And my mum used to say, look, sooty pause. And then on the last page, where the character has moved to the countryside, where it's full of life, we have what my mum used to call clean pause. It's not part of the story, but that contrast was really engaging, and it was a moment where I would be able to point that out myself and copy my mum and learn from her as to how she interpreted picture books and how she learnt and loved picture books. And that's increased engagement with my parents about picture books, and I could learn from them. And this picture book was perfect for that, because she would discuss things that was going on and stuff like that. And the final thing that I loved about it is, usually in illustrations, when you have a character walking somewhere, they move from left to right. But in this scene, the scene is about how she's blending in with the cows. And she's not where you expect. She's actually here. And if you didn't notice that straight away, that's normal. A lot of children don't notice where she is straight away. It takes a moment. And that's because she's not where you'd expect her to be. So you're then going, oh, where is she? Because you'd expect her to be here, walking this way, but she's walking that way. So she blends in with the cow's head here and the patterns. And that is a fantastic example of how the illustrations support what the writing is saying by saying that she blends in, you can't see her. Because if they'd put her where she was supposed to be in the illustration, going from left to right when she's moving, in the illustrations, you would have spotted her quickly, and therefore you would have actually had less engagement. Whereas this way, you have that increased engagement because you're going, oh, I really can't see her. So again, it's another example of how the illustrations can be used to increase engagement, and that increased engagement is so important if you want your picture book to be successful. So thinking of different ways as a creator that you can make your book engaging is definitely the way to create a successful picture book. Number 3, White Rabbit's Colour Book. Now, I've bought this picture book again as an adult because I didn't have my childhood copy. And I think that I had a different copy when I was younger. This is the American version. We can tell because of the way they spelt the word colour. In English, we spell it differently. We have a U in it. And in the English version that I had as a child, I believe that there was an illustration on the last page that isn't in this picture book. Now, in that illustration, there was a picture of a bit of inception. There was a rabbit looking at a TV screen, watching a rabbit looking at a TV screen, and it continued like that. So it got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I used to look at that picture so much as a child that it's ingrained in my memory as the last image of that story. But it's not in this version. Now, I don't know whether that's true or not. I really hope that it is. If you know the answer, please comment below, because I loved that picture. And if I've completely invented that as a false memory, then that's really incredible, because I genuinely believe that was part of the story. And it's one of the things that stayed with me. And that's something interesting, isn't it? That as an adult, we can look back in our heads and remember the picture books we loved as a child, and certain things stick with us, certain phrases, words, and illustrations that last a lifetime. And so I love this picture book not only for that illustration, but also because as a child, it does an excellent example of what I call prime and reveal. You prime the audience by saying that the rabbit jumped into one of the primary colours of paint, red, yellow or blue, and then he jumped into another one, and you turn the page, you get your reveal. What colour do you get when you mix those two together? And as a child, I would know what was coming next and feel so clever that I'd worked out the answer. And that is why I love this picture book, is because it was very engaging. It's also got some beautiful illustrations. I love the phrase in it, Princess Purple Rabbit in the Shower. Love that imagery in my head. I enjoyed that. It was my favourite colour, described so beautifully. So yeah, it was definitely a picture book I loved as a child. And what we need to think about is when you have a prime and reveal, if the child knows what the answer is going to be, they get a little bit of dopamine in their brain when they get the right answer. And that dopamine, happy hormone, tick, you did great, makes you want to do it again. Which means a child wants to read that book again because they want to feel clever again because they know the answer. So this is why I love this book. And do let me know if you know whether that illustration is real or whether I've completely imagined it. I need to know the answer. Number 4 is Tooth Fairy. Now, I love this book because it features a main character called Jessica, who's a little bit naughty. And I wasn't always the most well-behaved little girl. So I love reading about a naughty Jessica and what she gets up to. And what's fantastic about this book is it shows you something that you've heard of, the Tooth Fairy, but where she lives. I don't know where she lives. No one's ever showed me that before, so it was an illustration of something new and unique. You get to see a beautiful castle made of teeth and what they do with them. And there are some robots in there which you didn't know. The Tooth Fairy was involved with robots. So it's a really fantastical concept for what is a well-known idea that the Tooth Fairy takes your teeth. And it answers that age-old question of what does the Tooth Fairy do with all those teeth? So I love that because it explores something that I would be interested in and also features a naughty character, which it's not giving permission for me to be naughty, but it's showing me that even when you're naughty, you're still loved and appreciated because at the end of the story, she's still loved. She makes up for what she's done. She's sorry and everything's okay. And as a child, you want to know that when you mess up, people still love you and everything's going to be okay. Number 5. And on the theme of naughty Jessicas, we have Who's Making That Mess? I Bet It's Messy Jess. Now, you may recognise the illustrations by Stephen Cartwright. He does things such as... Can you find the little duck on the page? Now in this story, we got to find the different items and find out who was being naughty, and that naughty Jess actually was innocent, is not as naughty as the book makes out. And so I like that because again, it's about a character with the same name as me, a little bit naughty, but she's not always to blame. We still love her even though she's a bit cheeky. And also it's that little dopamine once again. We find the right answer, we find the duck, we find the item, we feel oh so clever. And that's another reason why I love this picture book as a child. Number 6, Six Dinner Sid. This book was read to me when I was in school. Now, as a child, I didn't know the name of the title of the book. I didn't know the type of illustrations, and I didn't know what the front cover looked like. So this book was lost to me. I enjoyed the story. I loved it at school, but it was lost to me to time. So then as an adult, when I saw this with its black cat, clear illustration about the fact that this character is eating lots of food, and we have a fantastic title going on, I mean, that is simply fantastic marketing. I knew exactly that this was the book I loved as a child, and I bought it without opening it, knowing that this was definitely that story. Took it home, lo and behold, it was. And that is powerful marketing of a front cover. The fact was, I remembered the story. I didn't need anything more than that to find it. That is amazing. So, but the thing is that wasn't why I loved it as a child. The reason that I loved it as a child was because the illustrations do a very good job of being like a puzzle. Now, the cat on each page has 6 different neighbours where he does 6 different things, he acts differently and he sleeps in different places. And it's a puzzle because you're working out which ones go together. See, this character is wearing a ring. So when the ring pops up later, and this is wearing a stripy shirt, you find a character wearing a stripy shirt, you can piece together those little illustrations throughout the book and work out in your mind what is going on when the cat acts in a certain way on which neighbour, which part of the story. You can piece that all together. And when you've worked that out, again, you get that little bit of a dopamine, well done, you've worked it out moment, you feel very clever. It's so engaging for multiple readings because if you remember, children are reading the illustrations before they're learning how to read text. So it's still reading. A picture book with no words is still reading. It's called visual literacy. They are learning visually how to read a sequence of pictures and different things that's going on. They use visual learning to understand films like Pixar films. They don't need to understand the words to understand that a character is sad because they see the visual elements, the hints that there is something going on that is sad. And it's the same with this picture book, is you are learning from the visuals. So this is why I love that. And what we can learn from this is that having engaging illustrations that are revealing bits like a puzzle and having excellent marketing on our front covers is fundamental for having a picture book that is recommended to others because, you know, I didn't know the title of the book, but I could describe it to somebody and they could probably, if they'd heard of that book, they could probably have shown me where to go. And that's amazing. Number 7. The next book is Funny Bones. Now, you might be surprised why I love this one so much. Obviously, fantastic story, but when you're reading it, the illustrations do a fantastic job of telling the story, so much so that you don't actually even need the words. And this was capitalised by my auntie, who used to read this book to me in Welsh. Now, I don't speak Welsh. She's fluent. She used to sing to me in Welsh and speak to me in Welsh and read these books in Welsh. And I loved it. I loved it because even though I didn't understand the words, I was able to enjoy that listening experience and follow along with the story by looking at the illustrations. And there's a bit in it where you can sing the Funny Bone song, which is, you know, the knee bones connected to the, and all that kind of thing. And she used to sing that to me in Welsh. And I loved that bonding experience and learning and hearing the amazing sounds that the Welsh language has, and learning bits of Welsh along the way because you would hear the words and be able to connect them to the words in the story. And what you can take away from that as a picture book creator is that you don't know how your audience will use your book. I am certain that they had no idea that I would be taught Welsh using this picture book as an example. But the reason that this book works is because it shows you the illustrations so clearly that you don't need to be able to speak the language to know what is going on. So if it had been a different picture book, Welsh probably wouldn't have worked for me, but it worked so well with this one. I actually enjoyed it so much in Welsh that when I had my own children, I actually asked her to transcribe or record the version in Welsh so that I could share that with my children, because that was part of the experience for me. It wasn't just the story, it was the entire experience that was special. And I wanted to emulate that with my own children. And that's amazing. If you can get your picture book to be an experience for a child, then it absolutely will become one of their favourites. Number 8. Slinky Malinky. Now, you might have spotted a theme by now that quite a lot of these books feature black cats. Now, I didn't know at the time that I really liked black cats, but looking back as an adult, I can kind of see that, yeah, there's a pattern here. So this is an example of a picture book that fulfills an interest that the audience has already. So the reason that I loved Slinky Malinky is, once again, we've got a naughty character, but also we've got some fantastic words going on. Words that I didn't know. Rapscallion cat. Even now, as an adult, when somebody says the words rapscallion cat, I think Slinky Malinky. That's the power of a picture book when it comes to the writing, is if you can write it in a way, turn a phrase or some words strung together that are unique, that you aren't expecting it to be in that way, then your brain can take those words and it will keep them in the head as a reference for future explanation and understanding and context of situations. So the word rapscallion, I'd never heard of it before I read Slinky Malinky, and so now whenever I hear the word rapscallion, at the back of my mind, it kind of like goes, oh, I know where I've heard that before. And isn't that quite powerful if you think about it, that a single word can make your picture book be rememberable? This is what that person's managed to achieve with having a picture book that features interesting and unique words. And Slinky Malinky, the name, very unique. I've never heard anyone else named that, any other character. So she did a phenomenal job of writing unique characters and using interesting words. And also she has a naughty character where you know that from the setup that something's going to go wrong. You know, they can't keep stealing forever. We know that stealing is bad, so something's going to happen to this character. And this is the setup that she has managed to achieve. So when something does go wrong, once again, you feel so clever as the child because you know stealing bad. So this story must end where the character gets their comeuppance for doing wrong. And we are kind of reassured that yes, the rules that we understand of the world are true, that stealing is bad, and this book reaffirms that. So we are using this book as context for understanding the world around us, and also context for understanding new words that we're introduced to when they are referenced again in the future. So I love this cat so much. Love this book. Number 9, Peepo. Now, this actually is by the same people as Funny Bones, actually, which I didn't know that until I was an adult. But the reason I loved this so much is because, first of all, it's very engaging, kind of hunt and find the item that's described in the writing. But also, there is a mystery going on in this illustration. You see, these are not what I grew up with. I didn't have this kind of pram, and I didn't have a lot of the things that are shown in this home because I am not born in this era. This is very much during the time when my grandparents and great-grandparents were children. This is not for me when I was a child. So I recognise what some of the things are, but not everything. It's a bit like these days handing a child a record player or a CD and asking them what it does and how to make it work. They probably don't know. It's not what they've grown up with. And this is where the adult can inform the child and increase engagement by teaching. And when the child asks questions like, what is this? What is that? What's going on? Then the adult can be made to feel clever as they explain. And it increases engagement as they want to tell their child more and teach them. And it's perfect for people of the older generation who maybe grandparents who might want to share their personal experiences. They'll explain how they used to use the old type of iron, which is not used anymore. And the other thing that's mysterious is there's definitely something emotive going on here. Yes, the story is about putting a baby to sleep, but the illustration shows throughout the course of this day the family getting ready for something, and then the dad is dressed in army uniform and goes to kiss the baby goodnight as he leaves. Now, as a child, I picked up on that there was something going on, but I didn't know what it was. And it is only now, as I've grown up, I come to understand the context, that I look back at those memories of me looking at those pictures, trying to work it out, and it all makes sense. And it stuck with me all those years, those illustrations, and now they provide context. as an adult as to what was going on. And that's the power of a really good illustration, is the visual literacy skills might not happen in that instant, but if it is such a good illustration that you remember it, then later when you find the words to explain it, it'll all make sense, and those little neurons all start connecting in the brain and everything all comes together. And I love that part about neuroscience, is that you might have a bunch of little threads of different ideas and you don't know how they all work together, and suddenly you have this big mind map as it all works out. And don't be afraid to write picture books that maybe deal with difficult topics, because my parents were able to give me the amount of information that I could cope with when I was that age. And it opens up that discussion. And it's the place that we can, as children, explore those really difficult concepts. Number 10. So we started this list off with the smallest picture book I own. And we're going to end it with the largest picture book I own. Now this I also kept from my childhood, and it's absolutely enormous. It's not going to fit on my screen at all. It's called The Night the Toys Came to Life, and it's humongous as an adult, okay? So just imagine how much that swamped me as a baby, as a child growing up. It's huge. Now the reason that I absolutely adore this picture book growing up was because of the illustrations. On every single page you have so many anthropomorphized animals doing different human activities that are within a theme for each page. So on one page they're all doing school related activities, on another they're at a fun fair, and it's just brilliant because you can spend hours, and I used to spend hours poring over the page, seeing what it was that they were doing, and also imagining what was going to happen next. Because if you had a bucket fall off a wall, you could kind of imagine that perhaps it would land on top of another animal that was underneath. But none of this was shown. There was no like results. It was always just, this is a snapshot of time of what all these animals are doing, and you are going to just go and imagine what's next. And I just loved spending so long reading the illustrations, because that's what children who can't read do. They are still reading. They are doing what's called visual literacy. They are learning to read the pictures. And that's what that is. When you are seeing a bucket fall and knowing that that's going to land on somebody's head if they are stood underneath, that's your visual literacy. You know the story of that from one image, and that's them reading. They are reading the illustrations, and that's what a good picture book can do. It's because the text is for the adults and the illustrations are for the children that can't read yet or are learning to read yet, so that they can piece together that vocabulary. If they know the word bucket and and then the parent has said what happens next with that word, they now know when they compare it to the illustrations what the parent is saying. And this is one of the reasons why children that are regularly exposed to picture books have increased vocabulary when they go to school, why they have a better understanding of the world, because of visual literacy. So reading illustrations is a form of reading, and it is so very important for development. And I actually don't know what the written story is in this picture book. I don't think I've ever read it. I can't remember my parents ever reading it to me. I just remember in vivid detail the illustrations, and when I've kept this, I've given it to my children, and I'll say, where is the dog? What's the dog doing? And it helps them not only find the character, which increases engagement, a bit like Where's Wally, can you spot them? But also it's brilliant for them to learn how to describe things. You ask them questions. Can you explain to me what is happening? What is going next? And this is, again, increased engagement. It's going above and beyond the story. It's not what the writer intended, the creator of this picture book. They obviously wanted to write a wonderful story, but you can't control, like I said earlier, you can't control how your audience will use a picture book. What you can control is what you give them that they can then use. So this is an example of a book that supports that independent reading and visual literacy that children can learn from and develop. So if, as a creator, we can learn that sometimes it's about giving the kids, the children, just a little bit more information in that illustration. You don't have to just do the really plain, simple illustrations. We can have detailed images. So that concludes my 10 favourite picture books from when I was a child. And the main things that we can take away from it is think about what it is that children enjoy. I apparently love cats. Other children will have other interests. So find out from the children in your lives what they're interested in and passionate about. The next thing to consider is it's absolutely okay to talk about difficult topics like war and things, or have naughty characters up to no good. If it's a safe space, then they can explore these difficult concepts and emotions with somebody who cares to read to them enough to explain to them what is going on and help them through that difficult processing. So don't be afraid to have those difficult things described, because it might be the thing that the child is looking for, is trying to understand the world on a deeper level. The next thing to consider is that maybe the name of your character might actually play an important role. I like my name. Some children like their name too. Some people don't like their name. But do consider whether the name is perfect for your picture book or not. And why not look and see if a popular name might just fit your story or not. Another thing to remember is make your audience feel clever. Have things like, when red and blue mix together, it makes, of course it's purple, and a child who knows that will feel so clever, and if they keep reading it, then they will learn that, if they don't already know it, and they will feel so clever and get a little bit of dopamine every time that they get that answer right, and it'll make them keep coming back. And it's the same for adults. If an adult feels like they know something that the child doesn't, and they get to explain it to them, they'll feel so clever because I know what it is, and I can tell you how they used to use the old type of irons, the non-electric kind. These are things that, adults can give and make them feel a little bit clever when they add something extra to your picture book. And the next thing to remember is you can't control how your audience will use your picture book. Maybe they'll speak it in Welsh. Maybe they'll sing. Maybe they'll dance out those actions. You don't know, but what you can do is put in things that will encourage them to use it. By having those action words, they're more likely to actually do those actions. By having words in there that are written in a way to be a song, they're more likely to be sung. So do those interesting ways of getting people to engage with your picture book beyond just reading a story and looking at the pictures. And the next thing is, if you're an illustrator, don't be afraid to have more complicated images. It's a fashion at the moment to have very plain illustrations, and that's great for some picture books, but other picture books do benefit from a little more going on. So don't be afraid to have that in there if it's needed. And the final one is, who doesn't love Can You Find This? Spot That, Where's Wally? Where's the duck? Turn the page, what could it be? Where's this? Who doesn't love that in the illustrations? They're more engaging, just like having more detail is more engaging. It helps increase that vocabulary and engage with your picture book further. And that's what we want. The more engagement children have with a single picture book, the more likely they are to pick it up again and again, the more likely that parents will enjoy reading it again and again and share it with others. And that's what we want on our journey to creating a successful picture book. So now that you've heard my favourites, comment below if you have any recommendations and the reasons why you liked them. And maybe we can finally understand what it is that our audience want from us. You can check out my website, jessicacolliver.com, if you'd like to get notes from today's topic. And if you're interested in another video about creator considerations, then don't forget to ring that bell icon when you subscribe, because my upload schedule depends on quality content, not quantity, so you might just miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and to all you creators out there, happy experimenting. Psst! I gotta wonder if I have a false memory about that rabbit book. Either that illustration is real, or that's the power of imagination and an engaging picture book. Incredible.